Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, Hugh Freeze going into year three, spared no expense, going to the transfer portal, making this team better heading into 2024. And I think the feeling within Auburn fans, and certainly I feel this way as well, this needs to be the year that it all starts coming together. And you look at this roster, Dill, you feel pretty good about the talent Auburn has on this team heading into 2025. I took my best stab at predicting the 2025 depth chart for this Auburn program. And Dill kind of opens up two different conversations. One, we kind of get to debate how we think some of these positions play out for Auburn during spring practice and fall camp. But I think just as importantly, it kind of allows us to take a step back and say, all right, this is what we've done in the transfer portal so far. Where else on this roster do we maybe need to address heading into the 2025 year? For the Auburn fans, let it fly in the comments section. I'm sure there are some takes that I have with this depth chart that y'all don't like. Dale, I already know you don't like a few of the takes, so you're going to get into me. Would love to hear from the Auburn fans as well. The support's been amazing from you guys throughout the whole transfer portal process. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, without further ado, I think I got the quarterback right. Jackson Arnold, I think, is coming in to be the guy. I would think Deuce Knight's the quarterback too. And I know you're bringing an experienced veteran quarterback like Ashton Daniels. Look, Deuce Knight versus Ashton Daniels from a talent standpoint, it's just kind of different. The conversation that I want to get to, and I will add this note real quick. Look, I don't think you have a Jarquez Hunter in the running back room. I think he was one of the better backs in the SEC last year. I really do like Jeremiah Cobb, and I think this is the year he puts it all together and can be the guy for Auburn. This is where the fun conversation gets into. This wide receiver room is loaded, right? And if you're Hugh Freeze in Auburn, you're trying to figure out the best recipe. How do you get all these football players on the field, and how do you use them? I went Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton with Malcolm Simmons in the slot. How do you feel about that?
And that's where it's going to get interesting because I look at Eric Singleton and where he's going to play. That's, to me, going to be the interesting one because he's a guy who I think can play both on the boundary, play in the slot. And Malcolm Simmons, for as much of a great athlete as he was, and they used him in more of a gadgety role, it felt like last year, catching swing passes and screens. I think there's still a little bit of development as a pure receiver for him. And I look like Horatio Fields a really interesting guy to have on the boundary. Obviously, Perry Thompson, if you're just talking pure talent, really the only one he's taken a back seat to is probably Cam Coleman. So you look at that boundary spot, I feel like you have a lot of options to go to. Eric Singleton, though, in my opinion, immediately comes in is the best slot guy on that team.
I think that's why it made so much sense to bring Eric Singleton in, is because he can do it all. Like he was one of the most complete wide receivers, if not the most in the transfer portal. Not only was he one of the best, he's not pigeonholed into, one responsibility at the wide receiver spot. So it does give you flexibility in terms of how you get all these guys on the field. Now,
and I don't want to make it it's almost like academic to an extent because it feels like wide receivers now in so many.
Oh yeah, 100%.
They almost need to be able to play and be a little bit more versatile. There are for sure some guys who are pure slot guys, but gone are the days of guys who basically play on the boundary and can't do anything besides make contested catches or work down the field. Good wide receivers, Stan. I think for the most part that's what you have with Auburn. You can line them up almost anywhere, and I think that's probably where Auburn's going to be at. They probably have 6 guys you really want to get on the field pretty much in any given game.
So I'll say two things. One, I'm higher on Malcolm Simmons than you are. This kid, as a true freshman, it was a little bit raw at times. They love him. It's very clear that this Auburn staff loves him because they were trying to get him involved in any which way they could. And I think going into year 2, he only cleans up some of the rawness. I think he only develops as a wide receiver. To me, he's a guy that Auburn wants on the football field, but you probably say the same thing for a guy like Horatio Fields and Perry Thompson too. Dill, here's the other thing that kind of popped through my brain here. You think Auburn goes to more 4 wide receiver sets here? Because you look at it, and it's not like I don't like the tight end room, and it's Preston Howard and a couple other names that, look, they're solid tight ends, but I don't think they're game changers. You got 4 or 5 game changers at the wide receiver position. And at some point in football, yeah, I get you want to run with the tight end, but at some point you got to get all your good football players on the football field at the same time. And to
And
me,
clearly speaking, do you have the type of running back that is really going to do what Jarquez Hunter didn't run that sort of physical style? Not saying you haven't, but again, I look right now, strength on paper, it's in that wide receiver room. So I'm kind of with you. I don't know that it'll be a super condensed offense that plays with a lot of tight ends and tries to like kind of play bully
yeah,
ball. Again, you want to get the ball to your best players. It is feels like that wide receiver room right now.
yeah, I'm with you. And Jackson Arnold can get it going with himself in the run game too.
Oh yeah.
I'm kind of with you. All right,
That's almost like another reason to probably spread it out a little bit because again, you want to
it's
create numbers with him in that running game without necessarily needing to add blockers. So I think again, like it probably will lend itself to a lot of wide receivers on the field.
yeah, and that's kind of the way I look at it. And maybe it's just like my stupid brain working, but it's like get your best players on the football field. And to me, it's like you want to get all these wide receivers on the football field at the same time. Offensive line, Dill. I thought Auburn crushed it on the offensive line in the portal. I mean, they got arguably the best left tackle in the portal in Xavier Chaplin. You return a guy like Dylan Wade, Connor Lewis center. That left side of the offensive line is dynamite. It's going to be one of the better left sides that you see in the country. Now, going over to the right side, it's a lot of different combinations that you can have. I think Mason Murphy's the one. And you get Jeremiah Wright, Xavier Miller. It's hard to keep track of all the eligibility, but it sounds like both of them are going to be back, which, hey, two guys that have played a lot of football for Auburn. Mason Murphy's the one I'm looking at. I think the left side's set. You don't have any question marks there. Mason Murphy to me, Dale, might be a sweet guard. Like, you look at his time at USC and say playing out in space, sometimes got himself in trouble at right tackle. He's not a bad right tackle, but I wouldn't say he's the most reliable right tackle either. But man, can he road grade in the run game? And man, is he good in a phone booth. So I look at it and say you got a couple of potential answers at right tackle, maybe the best set. And I stuck Mason Murphy at the right tackle spot to start because I do think that's where Auburn's going to give him his first look. But I do think there's a scenario where Mason Murphy potentially kicks in the right guard because I do think that's probably the best position for him on this Auburn offensive line.
Yeah, this would be one I really wouldn't be stunned to see Dylan Wade play right tackle. Like I look like if
Ooh,
I'm thinking who are the two best pure tackles on this team,
okay.
Dylan Wade, for as much as like maybe projects a little bit better as a guard at the NFL
Yep.
level, he's a very serviceable tackle at the college level. You put him on the right side. I look and you're trying to get your best five. I think Braden Joyner needs to be on the field. I thought he came in as a young player, a little bit more of a physicality element in his game
Yep.
that maybe I saw from some other Auburn linemen. I think he's a guy I look at. I think you want him on the field. And then you look like Mason Murphy, Jeremiah Wright, them battling it out for kind of that open guard spot, if you will. I think you have good competition there. But I look, if you're trying to get your best five, I think Braden Joyner is playing, and I think Dylan Wade is playing at one of the tackle spots because I don't love what they have at right tackle in terms of what you put out here. Because you're right,
Yeah.
Mason Murphy didn't play great at that spot.
I agree. And I think that's part of the benefit of taking a guy like Mason Murphy. Like the position flex is becoming such an important aspect of building an offensive line. One, because of what you said, it allows you the flexibility to say, hey, these are our best five offensive linemen. We can now more readily get them all on the field at the same time and create the best offensive line we can. Secondly, Dill, look, depth on the offensive line is huge. And if a guy goes down, I mean, when you have the ability to play Mason Murphy at right tackle and say, you can go play right tackle and be successful, but you also can be a really good guard. I do like how the Auburn offensive line is shaking out. And I look at this offense and say, Dill, I'm going to probably use this analogy all offseason long. If you can get the reverse of the Bo Nix, right? Jackson Arnold, Oklahoma didn't have any help. I mean, it was, and I get Jackson Arnold was not great for Oklahoma in 2024. That offense flat out sucked, like at all three spots around him. He's coming to Auburn. I think that it'll be a very quality offensive line in front of him. Elite pass catchers on the outside. If Jackson Arnold can play the way we thought he was going to play coming out of high school, this is going to be an offense that puts up a lot of points. Now, going over to the defensive side of the football, Dill, it's not as many transfers. I think where your eyes immediately go to is where the color goes to, and that is the new players coming into this roster. It's on the defensive line. Look, we know we got a guy in Keldrick Falk. I the edge position in general is going to be really good, right? Keldrick Falk, Amaris Williams going into year two, Kieron Crawford, Jamonta Waller. I love it. And potentially Jared Smith. I think Jared Smith might be a guy that maybe needs a year, but I just saw him working out in one of those all-star games, way more developed than we talked about when he committed to Auburn a couple months ago. Like, this kid's ready to rock and roll.
I'm ready for the youth movement in the defensive line. I'm with you. I like seeing a lot of the blue. I like seeing freshmen. I think that's a group that, again, you're starting to see some guys play well. Like Keldrick Falk, I thought played really, I mean, he was dominant for them last year. He took a monster step forward.
Yep.
You love what you saw from him. I think Malik Blockton's very, very good.
Yep.
But I'm kind of ready for that youth movement that we kind of been talking about. Like, just wait until Hugh Freeze kind of gets his recruits through the
So
pipeline.
I'm with you. Like,
very
trust me, nobody likes the youth movement more than me. Like, you spend my whole summer talking about recruiting, but it is the line of scrimmage tougher. You know, it's hard to throw 18-year-old kids out on the line of
Yeah, but
scrimmage.
I
in
look
the
at like
SEC.
Malik Autry. Like, I mean, that's
Ready.
not an 18-year. He just looks very physically ready to rock and roll. If they can get him roll, like,
Yep.
again, the way Auburn's recruiting, I don't know that they need as much time to develop because they're coming in. I mean, they got like the best guys in the country. Like, they were competing with every
To
best.
me, it was the best defensive line class, maybe outside of Georgia, you saw in the class, and that means something. And it not only is it going to pay dividends in 2025, but it's going to pay dividends down the road. But you look
see a guy like Malik Blockton come in, and he played really good for Auburn. I almost think people don't like talk enough about how good he was as a true freshman.
Yeah. We'll see where this might be a position where it's like, all right, let's get some of these early enrollees in. Let's see what they look like in spring practice. If we need to go grab some depth, we will. That's kind of where I'm at. You're out of your mind.
You're a bit of a Gage Keys situation where, like, okay, you go grab depth, but if you're Auburn, you're recruiting the guys like you are at the defensive line spot. Are you really going to get guys who are better than the guys you have? I mean, I know they're young, but like, look, there's just not talented defensive linemen in the portal year in and year out.
But there's quality depth pieces like Jeffrey Mba. It sounds like Auburn wants to go out and get. To me, my only pushback on what you're saying is it is a risky game, especially with Hugh Freeze in year 3, to start just rolling out freshmen because you got to play them. Because at some point, look, I think there's a lot of optimism, especially with someone like Malik Autry and Jordan Crawford. Like, those guys to me look ready to play. But do you want to necessarily bet on that? That's kind of the question. We'll see. I think we'll be able to tell in terms of how Hugh Freeze operates in the portal. Like, if they go out and get some defensive linemen, maybe that's kind of saying we want some more guys in the rotation. And you can never be deep. You can never be deep enough on the lines of scrimmage. Linebacker play. You're losing a lot of experience, but I think physically, like from a talent standpoint, it might be an upgrade. DeMarcus Riddick has every inkling of potential to be one of the best linebackers in the SEC. Now, does he put it? You're kind of rocking with some youth, but Dill, I am fired up to see what these young linebackers can do.
Yeah, and you love that you got to see some legit play from DeMarcus Riddick, where again, like you certainly see that there's a much higher ceiling, and it's not like he was dominant necessarily as a true freshman. But everything about what you saw makes you think that he's gonna be ready to rock and roll. And then you're kind of right. You just need to kind of find that guy to run with him, because I do think you kind of have your linebacker one, Robert Woodyard, Joe Bart, like those guys, or the rest of that group, if you will. I think you're gonna be able to find your guy, and you don't need to necessarily be as deep as you need to be at defensive line. You just need to probably have 3 or 4, and I think Auburn's gonna be fine there.
Yeah, I agree. And then in the back end, there's a lot of options that Auburn has. The young cats played awesome last year, like Jay Crawford, Caleb Harris. That's about as impressive as you're going to see true freshmen play. You have some confidence, and you bring in Ryan Strader from Miami of Ohio, who's an absolute dude. Like, this was one of the more coveted cornerbacks that you saw in the portal. So I look at the cornerback, spot, Jay Crawford, Strader, Kane Lee. Those are 3 cornerbacks we trust. You look at the safety spot. You really like Caleb Harris. Still, I like Terrence Love a lot. He's just kind of been one of my guys. You got some good cats coming in. I think headlined by Anquan Fagans. But there's some versatility in terms of who you want at safety, who you want at nickel, similar to the offensive line. Because you have that versatility, I look at it and say, it's hard not to feel good about where the secondary is going to be in 2025 for
And
Auburn.
you kind of saw them rolling their safeties and nickels throughout. I mean, Caleb
Yeah.
Harris, Sylvester Smith, Terrence Love is a guy who, especially I think in 2023 more so than 24, you got to see him do some different things. So another versatile player. So
Yep.
I look like you have a lot of guys who I think can play both roles. Anthony Champ is probably the one true nickel, if you will,
Yeah.
and the guy who I don't know that you'll see at safety or see be as versatile in that sense. But the other guys, you look at those three I just mentioned, and the Anquan Fagans is kind of the X factor, if you will, a guy who we don't really know a ton about aside from the fact that he is ultra talented. But you definitely do have, with that safety room, especially, a lot of guys who can do a lot of different things. And I mean, you're so encouraged, I think, especially by the way Caleb Harris and Sylvester Smith played like good physical players, do a decent enough job in coverage. And if they like kind of make the jump that frankly some of the true freshmen made as or the true freshmen from 23 made in 24, you really like I think what
Well,
you have it.
that's the exciting part for me with Auburn is there a lot of these players that we're talking about. DeMarcus Riddick, guy like Caleb Harris, guy like Jay Crawford. They were good as freshmen, but they're not fifth year guys going into their 6 year college football where they're just not getting better. Like these guys, I think are progressing. Having gone through this depth chart, is there a position that you look at and say would like to see Auburn maybe shore it up before they go into 2025?
If anything, it'd probably be the linebacker spot realistically.
Yeah.
I'm very much comfortable with the defensive line. I know you look it's a little bit young, but I think you have two guys who are coming back who played really good ball for them as the two guys you have listed starting, a decent depth guy in Dallas Walker, and then you're going to get one or two of those young freshmen, I think, to play at a high enough level to give you 20
Yeah.
snaps or whatever you're going to need. I do look at the linebacker spot. That's probably one you're losing basically in the entirety of the production from that unit last year.
Mhm.
That's probably one I might look at and be like, and that's a hard one, frankly, to replace. It feels like this year because I don't love the class.
Oh, it's horrible.
You're probably going to have to deal with younger.
I almost don't mind it. I almost don't mind Auburn. Just like I think they kicked around a kid from Fresno State, but it's like, are we just gonna bring in like a linebacker? Like I'd rather them go out and get some more firepower on Jackson Arnold than go settle for a linebacker that I don't think plays over to Marcus Riddick or Robert Woodyard. So I kind of like what Auburn's done. And Dill, as we sit right now, and this does not mean Hugh Freeze is done. It's like Hugh Freeze, he's a roster building machine. But I do like what you look at going into spring practice. Obviously, we'll evaluate after spring practice some of the stuff that we hear. We'll wrap it up there. Auburn fans, one, portal additions you'd like to see made. Number two, let my depth chart have it. You know when I'm breaking out Excel, I mean business. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.